The room smelled of old wood and fading memories. Sunlight filtered through tall, dusty windows, falling across the polished mahogany table where the will lay like a sleeping truth. I sat at one end straight, backed, hands folded, calm as still water. Yet beneath my skin the past churned like a burning sea. Years of silence, years of being forgotten, years of building myself from ash to iron, and now I had returned. Across from me lounged my brother, Sami, with the arrogance of a man who believed the world belonged to him by birthright. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, smirk resting comfortably on his lips, as if the inheritance was merely a formality, a ceremony recognizing what was already his. His wife, Hania, sat beside him in expensive silk, her eyes flickering between guilt and discomfort. She knew me once, knew my softness, my dreams, yet she now avoided my gaze like it burned. The family lawyer cleared his throat, voice steady and rehearsed. "We are gathered for the official reading of Mr. Rahim's estate." Before he could continue, Sami leaned forward, voice cutting across the room like a blade. "Let's not waste time. I am the elder son. Everything comes to me." The room stiffened, gasps, whispers, shifting glances. Relatives looked at me with pity, expecting anger or desperation, expecting me to beg for scraps, but I didn't move. I only breathed slowly, watching the gold frame of our father's portrait hanging behind the lawyer, his stern eyes, his silent judgment. He had always been hard to read, always quiet, always distant. Many believed he favored Sami, though sometimes I wondered if his silence meant something else, something unspoken. The lawyer tapped the papers lightly. "Mr. Rahim's will must be read in full. You both are heirs," Sami scoffed loudly. "Heirs? He left home years ago. He doesn't deserve a rupee, especially not after abandoning father during his final years. Abandoned." The word struck like a stone, but I didn't allow it to shatter anything inside me. I had left, yes, but not out of selfishness. I left because the house that raised us had become a battlefield where I was always meant to lose. Still, I remained silent. Silence is stronger than shouting. It unsettles, it confuses, it waits. The lawyer resumed reading, voice echoing across polished walls. Titles, properties, accounts numbers slipping like cold rain. Sami's smile widened with every mention. When the lawyer paused and lifted his gaze, I finally raised my head. I smiled slow, quiet, deliberate. My voice was barely louder than a whisper, yet it silenced the room. "Dad, don't you know? The storm had only just begun, before the will, before the table of inheritance, before gold turned to dust, and titles turned into weapons, there was childhood. People remember family as warmth. I remember it as uneven sunlight bright where Sami stood, dim where I reached. He was the celebrated firstborn, the one who ran through hallways with laughter that brought gifts and applause. Father lifted him onto his shoulders. Mother covered him with pride like a blanket. When he fell, arms rushed. When he wanted, the world bent, and I was the second son, the quiet note in a loud song. I learned to eat last, to speak softly, to swallow disappointment like medicine. Not because I was unloved, but because I was invisible in love's shadow. Sami was fire. I was embers, alive but unnoticed. The rift grew as we did. At school, Sami excelled in charm, but not in work. I stayed in libraries, buried in books, solving equations he couldn't pronounce. Yet when awards were brought home, his name was cheered while my certificates collected dust in drawers. Sami is smart in his own way, they'd say, and I wondered, was I too quiet to be seen? But the deepest cut came wrapped in sweetness, Hania. She and I used to share secrets under almond trees. We exchanged notebooks filled with poems, promises, and plans. She said my words painted worlds she wanted to live in. I believed her. I believed in us, until Sami noticed her. He never wanted love. He wanted victory. He stole my smiles, my future, using charm dipped in venom. He whispered that I was weak, aimless, unworthy. And when Father announced their engagement at dinner, Sami looked at me like a conqueror watching a fallen city. My heart didn't break. It collapsed quietly, like an old house no one noticed leaning. I left home soon after. No shouting, no goodbyes, just silence. My oldest companion. I traveled far, carrying nothing but a wounded heart and the hunger to prove I existed. I washed dishes in tiny restaurants. I slept on hard mattresses in cold apartments. I studied by streetlight when rent swallowed my wages. Nights were long, food was scarce, hope was thin, but every struggle built me, every tear sharpened me. While Sami spent money like rainwater, I built myself like stone. I learned business, finance, leadership. I carved a company out of sweat and sleepless nights, Iron International Holdings. Named after the boy no one saw. Father rarely called, but once, just once, he asked, "Are you happy, son?" And I replied, "Not yet, but I will be." He said nothing, but I sensed pride beneath the silence. Now, years later, as I sat across from Sami in that inheritance room, I realized the boy they ignored had become the man they would never forget. Silence hung in the inheritance hall like a thick fog. The lawyer's voice faded, leaving behind a ringing tension only betrayal could create. Sami lounged back in his chair, as if the world was already stitched with his name. To him, this day was a coronation, a ceremony confirming his entitlement. He kept glancing at the relatives, a smirk dancing at the corner of his lips, waiting for applause that never came. My eyes traveled across the room, old portraits, velvet curtains, chandeliers heavy with dust. It was strange how a place once called home now felt like a museum of things no one had really seen. Memories sat here like ghosts. The lawyer cleared his throat, tapping a sealed envelope. Mr. Rahim left 2 parts in his will. The first is standard division. The second is conditional, and sealed until both sons are present. Sami scoffed, bored. "Read whatever you like. The company, lands, accounts, it's all mine. Just hurry." The arrogance in his voice no longer angered me, it tired me. He still thought victory was handed, not built. He had no idea the world outside these walls wasn't shaped by birthright, but by bruised knuckles, sleepless ambition, and the kind of hunger that grows in silence. The lawyer opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, as though words inside carried dynamite. As per Mr. Rahim's instructions, the full inheritance will pass to whichever son proves capability, independence, and responsibility beyond family assets. Sami's smirk faltered. A quiet ripple spread through the room. To evaluate this. The lawyer continued, assets, business growth, and financial discipline of both sons were privately investigated over the last 5 years. I watched Sami stiffen for the first time, unsure. Hania looked at him, her eyes trembling. She knew what I knew. Sami had burned wealth like paper in fire. He had nothing built, nothing earned, only consumed. The lawyer turned to me. Ian Rahim, founder and CEO of Ian International Holdings. Company valued 70 times the inheritance sum. Chairs shifted, breath caught. Whispered disbelief filled every corner. Sami shot to his feet. He left us. He did nothing. How? My voice cut through him softly. I didn't leave, I grew. I didn't raise my tone. I didn't need to. Truth has its own volume. The lawyer placed a final document on the table's signature line glowing with weight. According to Mr. Rahim's sealed conditions, the estate is awarded entirely to Ian Rahim. For a moment, time froze. Sami's hand trembled. His confidence cracked like shattered glass. The man who always took now had nothing to claim. I leaned back, same calm smile returning, the one that terrified him more than anger ever could. The boy he ignored had returned not for revenge, but for justice. And justice had spoken. The papers were signed, the gavel didn't fall. There was no dramatic shouting, no collapsing chandeliers. Only silence, deep, suffocating, and infinitely heavy. The inheritance, once imagined as Sami's unquestionable kingdom, now rested entirely in my hands. The room seemed smaller, almost suffocating, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Sami sat slumped in his chair, disbelief etched in every line of his face. His usual arrogance had evaporated, leaving only a pale, hollow shell of entitlement. Hania gripped his arm, her eyes wide, voice trembling. She didn't look at me, yet I could see the flicker of recognition in her gaze, the memory of the boy she once trusted, the man she had underestimated, and the life she had overlooked. I stood slowly, as if emerging from a long shadow. The calm I carried was heavier than any scream I could have made. I didn't gloat, I didn't raise my voice, I simply walked across the room, feeling the eyes of family and strangers alike follow me, wide with shock and disbelief. My hand brushed against the frame of Father's portrait, tracing the lines of a man who had always known. "Dad," I whispered, "you always did." The weight of the past fell away. The years of silence, the nights of struggle, the humiliation and pain, they all melted into a quiet, unshakable strength. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone now. Not to Sami, not to Hania, not to the relatives who had doubted me. I stepped outside into the crisp sunlight. The gates of the estate loomed before me, symbols of both history and wealth. Reporters and distant relatives whispered behind me, curious about the young man who had returned from nothing to claim everything. Their questions were endless, their astonishment palpable, but I answered none of it. I didn't need to explain. Actions, after all, spoke louder than any words. I paused at the edge of the driveway, looking back one last time. Sami's face was still pale, his shoulders heavy with shame and regret. I could almost hear the echo of the boy who once stole everything I loved, now powerless against the life I had built quietly, meticulously, relentlessly. I smiled, not with triumph, but with a quiet understanding. Revenge was never about cruelty. Revenge was about rising when others believed you would fall, about proving that life could be rewritten with patience, resilience, and silent strength. And as I walked away, leaving the estate and the ghosts of the past behind, I carried with me more than wealth. I carried freedom, pride, and the sweet, undeniable truth. The boy they ignored had become the man they would never forget. And for once, the world was finally mine, calm, complete, and utterly victorious.